I think there's some stuff that we collectively have got fundamentally wrong here. This isn't an issue for rugby or for the RFU or for Bristol Bears. It's a societal issue again. We need all of women's sport, and I'm sure there'll be other industries as well that need to come together that have the same challenges. But as a union or as one organisation, we can only do so much on our own, and we need to be able to use the experiences that athletes have to be able to demonstrate more broadly that we need more support in these areas.
Hello and welcome to the 6th Bristol Girls Can podcast. And today we're going to be talking about role models, and I have some amazing role models here. I have Abbie Ward from Bristol Bears and England. I have Alex Teasdale from the RFU, Amber Reid, who is also England and Bristol Bears, and I have Bryher Freight from Wesport. Welcome, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I'm going to start with you, Abbie. Obviously, you're at the pinnacle of your career at the moment. How did it all start?
Yeah, how did it start? I'm not really sure when did it start, a long time ago. I think growing up, I was just always active. I was playing every and any sport that came my way. I'm very lucky I grew up in the Lake District, so a very kind of active place. But yeah, I kind of fell into rugby by accident. I never intended for rugby to be the main sport. I actually quit at one point. I went along to rugby and it was too rough for me. So I actually stopped playing and but then picked it back up because a friend said, I want to try and go. Will you come with me? You used to play a little bit. And I said, yeah, okay. And like I said, it was by accident. I always played whatever I could. So I played club rugby and school rugby. And then there was an opportunity to play county. I went along to that. They said, do you want to go for Northwest trials, which I did, and then North and under 20s. And before I knew it, I was in the pathway and had these aspirations that I just wanted to go to the next level. And then one day had the opportunity to go and trial and train with the England senior women. And yeah, got my first cap in 2015, which seems like a lifetime ago.
Was there any other sports that inspired you? Was there anything you could have could we have seen you as Abbie Ward Lioness?
Yeah, yeah, I think I tried every sport. At one point I was like, athletics, I loved that. I wanted, I did district athletics as far as I got because I'm actually not that athletic, it turns out. Tennis, I was like, I'm going to Wimbledon. Love tennis. We had amazing grass courts where we lived that I just spent hours on every day, every night. Yeah, tried my best at tennis. Turns out I'm okay at tennis. Not that great. Skiing, again, I was lucky my parents took me skiing. Was in the school had a ski race team, believe it or not.
Wow.
I played everything, cricket, rounders, everything that was there, netball, hockey. I just gave everything a go.
Yeah.
And I eventually found, where like my skills, my, I guess, mindset fit best and what I enjoy. And what I love about rugby is, and this is probably why I love it, there's so many different aspects to it. So it's not just a one-dimensional sport. There's passing, kicking, tackling, set piece, like line out, scrum. And, from 1 to 15, you've all got a role to play and you've all got a very specific job. And it doesn't work if everyone is the same. It does not work.
Yeah.
Everyone has to do their part for the team to succeed. And I think that's why I love rugby so much, and I think that's where I found my place.
Amazing. And do you think that you were quite lucky with the opportunities you were given, or do you think you were just that kid that would have, sought them out anyway?
I think I was very, very lucky. One, in where I grew up. Two, in kind of the values that my parents instilled in terms of just getting stuck in, trying everything. But also that there was rugby at my school and at my club, and that wasn't, that wasn't everywhere, especially when I was growing up. It was very hard. The next team that we played was, we were in Keswick in the Lake District and we were going over to Newcastle for a game, which was a couple of hours, or down to Liverpool. So there wasn't teams dotted around. So it was just luck of the draw of what sports you had the opportunity to play. And there'll be other people that might have had the opportunity to play sports, which I didn't and have excelled in those. But I think where I was supremely lucky, and I think that's also illustrated by the fact that from Keswick, Kath O'Donnell and May Campbell and myself have all come. That's 3 red roses in we're in a space of maybe 3 years. And I don't think that happens by accident.
No. So Alex, can you tell me a bit about your journey through sport?
Yes, it's not quite as impressive as Abbie.
Sorry, hard act to follow, but you know.
So I think mine was a pretty traditional kind of entry in, which is a little bit sad. So when I was in primary school, I played football with the boys, and then you can't play football with the boys anymore. So I was like, what am I going to do now? So when I went up to senior school, I started to play hockey, and traditional story, and it was my PE teacher. She played hockey. So she took a load of us down to the hockey club, and that was in the Midlands in Cannock, and at the time it's one of the biggest hockey clubs in the country, and picked up the stick, loved it, just loved the whole kind of club atmosphere and environment. And to be honest, I think it could have been any sport that I was kind of taken to at that point in time. It was almost just what came with it, the friendships and all of those types of things. So I went on to university just up the road from here, actually, in Cheltenham. And it was actually the first time I came across women's rugby, and probably really rugby. I hadn't paid a huge amount of attention to it, and just seeing the rugby girls kind of out every week, and I just had no concept of the fact that you could do that, and so that's probably where then I picked up a bit of a love for it. But from a career point of view, having not played rugby in the same way that any of these guys have on the sofa, I started working at GB in England Hockey as in a part-time role for maternity cover. It was like the most unstable role that you could ever have, and it just kind of went from there.
That was your foot in the door,
That was my foot in the door, yeah. And then worked at the ECB for a little while as well, so got a bit of a cricket fix. And then I started, I got a job at the RFU just after the 2012 Olympics, and I was like, okay, these are my people, and this is my place. So it was really interesting, I think, going from kind of my sport that I kind of played in, and then getting that love for sport, and now here I am kind of doing it as a day job. So.
Amazing. So Amber, tell me about your journey through sport.
Really similar to Abbie's. So I grew up playing football, like with the boys, but any opportunity that I got to do something different, I did trampolining, gymnastics, until they told me I had to wear a leotard, and that was a no for me, so I was out for there. Continued football with the boys. We used to play with a tennis ball in the school playground, like literally any bit of space, any time, just outside. Then went through the same as Alex, the transition where you can't play with the boys anymore, like really daunting prospect to find a new team and to go. So I ended up playing for Bristol Rovers, and then kind of fell out of love with football a little bit, just didn't feel challenged, or like it just felt quite samey. So rugby's always been massive in my family. My dad, my brother played, my uncle played, and there was an opportunity at school. So the boys team at my school were like really, really good, national champions. The girls were like, we want a bit of that. So one of the teachers decided to start a girls rugby team, and we trained in lunchtimes and after school, and just to give it a go. And then it kind of snowballed from there. So we went to Roslyn Park, which is a massive sevens tournament, and there was England scouts walking around, and they picked myself and two other girls to go for under 18 or talent development group trials, which was back then. And we kind of got in. I was contact adverse, didn't really know what I was doing, but kind of fell in love with that, and then ended up a bit like what Abbie was saying, like in the pathway. And again, you didn't really have the role models to look up to. You didn't really see it much in the paper. I didn't really know who the England players were, and it's quite embarrassing now to think back. Like when I first joined Bristol when I was 18, Kath Spencer, the England captain at the time, was on that team, and I had no idea who she was. And I'm like, looking back, I was like, embarrassed about not knowing that.
There was nowhere to see that, though, was there? There was nowhere for you to kind of get that information. It wasn't on your Google, or, it wasn't on your TVs like it is today. So it's quite difficult to get that information unless you're really intrinsically in that environment.
Yeah, and I kind of like fell into the pathway stuff through playing at school. I didn't really play much 15s outside of that, and then ended up working back through the regional and the county system. But yeah, since like joining Bristol, going to the 2010 World Cup, then that's where I was like, rugby's my place. Like I still love playing other sports, but I was like, this is what I want to pursue. This is where I want to go, and I want to play for England.
And a question I got for you, because obviously you've been a PE teacher, and obviously listening to Alex's story, how much of being an influence to the young girls you teach is important. Obviously, like I said, you fell in love with hockey, and it could have been any sport, but it's because your teacher had that passion for it.
Yeah, it's that passion that comes across, and I think the way you deliver messages, the way you talk about things, you can really excite people by your language and like the passion that you show. And again, it could be for anything. Like, I'm really passionate about rugby because it's the game I play and I love, but again, it's about delivering that message about like being active. So especially in a school, you realise that not everyone's going to want to go play netball, not everyone's going to want to be in a team environment. Some people want to go and play a sport like tennis or badminton where they can be on their own. So it's how do you sell that picture, create that environment that's one that they want to go and try and they want to give a go. So I think, yeah, definitely as a PE teacher, I was really aware of how I came across, in particular to the girls that weren't as active or didn't have sport in like the forefront of their minds. How can I sell that to them? Even just that, find that tiny bit of spark that they'll want to continue at some point.
Yeah, and just making sure that they had the array of opportunities.
Yeah, and it's about finding that again, like Abbie spoke about it, like creating multiple opportunities, because there will be that one thing that someone like catches on to, and it's not the same for everyone.
No, definitely not. We're all different, aren't we? And Bryher, tell me a bit about your journey, because I know obviously you've kind of more recently found rugby.
Yeah, mine's completely unconventional, I think. So right from the start, my route into sport was through like equestrian. So my mum was an equestrian. I learned to ride a horse from when I was like 4. And then from that, it sort of spiraled being part of like pony club. I did something called tetrathlon, so that's like the children's version of modern pentathlon. So that's like an air rifle, you have to shoot a target, swim 200 metres, you can run a cross-country course and then ride a cross-country course on a horse. So I had that, and then alongside it, weirdly went down the athletics route. So I was sprinting as well as doing long distance. It got to a point where you had to choose one or the other. Yeah. You can't do both.
You can't be a sprinter on long distance.
Can't go fast and slow. That doesn't work. So about sort of 12, I made the change to sprinting, and then I did that all the way through until about 20-ish, and that sort of hit the ceiling at like nationals really, at university. And then it wasn't until I was in my teacher training year that one of the girls went, why didn't you come along to rugby, give it a go? Because I'd always wanted to play, and being from Cornwall is like a huge part. It's part of being Cornish, and you always want to do it. And because you're from Cornwall, there aren't always a lot of opportunities, I think, that it's quite a small place and that we didn't have it in school. We had the inspiration, like my teachers all wanted to do it, but they couldn't. I tried at university and then sort of took off from there, and I was hooked. I didn't want to stop. I played at my local team back at home, so that was Truro. And then I've moved in the last year, so I now play at Dings up at Shaftesbury Park.
Amazing. Yeah. And one thing I picked up from you is obviously it's the family inspiration, and I've opened up to all of you, but how big was it having, your family support and the family maybe inspiring what you did?
I think for me that, like, my mum was the equestrian in the family. My dad wasn't particularly sporty, but they all did it when they were younger and then sort of stopped. So it doesn't actually go that far in terms of like inspiration, but they were the driving force they were the role models because they were driving me around. Yeah. They were taking me everywhere, giving up their time, and that was huge for me when I look back of they sacrificed so much time. Yeah. And I owe them for that, and I'm so hugely grateful for that, I think.
Yeah, how about you? Your family must have had to travel a lot to watch you, and
and you know what, they're such an amazing support system for me. But it's funny because I've got 3 brothers, none of which play or know anything about rugby, and I think people assume, did you get into it because your brothers or your dad? No, I remember them coming to have coffee with me the morning of the 2017 World Cup, and my brothers were sat on the sofa next to me, and I'd say to them, come on then, how many points for a try? And they'd be like, 3? 4? And honestly, and that's so nice because when I'm with them, I've got a completely different outlet. We talk about different things. And I think, but they're, like I said, they're amazingly supportive. They're so active in their own different individual sports. But I think the thing from my parents is they were really supportive, but they were like, we're not going to do it for you. So if you want to go and do it, we'll support you, we'll help you, but you've got to arrange it and do it. So I remember going to under-20 trials, which was down in Wellington College, had no idea, still don't really know where it is, to be honest. And I had to get there by myself. They were like, okay, you've got to arrange it. How are you going to get there? And I think they dropped me at a train station at Penrith. I had to get the train down to Manchester, meet another girl who then their sister's friend was going to give us a lift down there. And,
quite a sketchy journey down there, really.
But then the worst thing was, so it was a 2-day camp, and then they told you the squad. And we sat, I remember it so vividly, we sat on this grandstand and they went, these are the girls that have made the squad and are staying for an extra day. And everyone else is going home, which was pretty brutal. I've never experienced anything
It was cutthroat.
like it.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, so they just read this list. And I remember hearing my name thinking, no, surely not. Like, me? And I didn't really believe it. I thought, any point now, for the rest of the day, I was waiting for them to come up to me and be like, oh, we accidentally said your name. We didn't mean it.
That'd be really cruel, though,
But
wouldn't it?
the brutal thing was, the person that I got a lift with wasn't staying the extra day, didn't get into the squad. So then she went home and I was thinking, well, now I'm stranded.
Don't know how I'm getting home.
But I think it's a funny story now, but I think what I'm trying to say is they gave me all the tools to be independent, determined, resilient, and they kind of equipped me with all this stuff that didn't make it easy to begin with, but I think have really helped me in the long run.
I think you need that for team sport generally, don't you? You need to be resilient because, what if you don't get picked for the game? And, there's lots of different factors. And obviously independence, you need to kind of be able to get yourself places, do things. So I think it is quite important to kind of have those qualities as well, isn't it? So
yeah, definitely.
I was going to say, I was thinking, is mine similar to yours? I think it's different actually, but I was fiercely independent as a kid, and my parents enabled me to go and do all the things that I wanted to do, but I probably didn't let them into that environment very much. And I think back now, and I don't have those memories of my parents being there, but it wasn't them, it was me.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting because I think I learned a lot along the way around trying to do those things for yourself, but I am a bit sad as well that I don't have those memories of your mum or your dad stood on the sideline. What they did do very, very well, which I did let them do, my birthday's 29th of August, so I'm the youngest in the year, which meant that I couldn't learn to drive until quite late. So I needed a lot of lifts for quite a long time, and they were brilliant at, getting up early, coming out late to pick me up and those types of things, so very grateful to.
So what about your parental or family influences? Did you have any?
Rugby was big in my family, but again, I was actively encouraged to try anything. Same as these guys, a lot of lifts, a lot of washing, in particular rugby. When you come back with 5 sets of kit and each one's covered in mud, it takes a lot of washing. I remember I was going through the phase of football, deciding whether I wanted to go or quit, and Mum was doing something with my younger sister, and she said, when I'm home, you need to be ready to go to football, and if you're not going. Okay. So I just didn't get ready, and I was like, that was the decision. I couldn't work out how to tell her, but she kind of gave me that bit to open up that conversation, and then from there, that was kind of the end of football and going into rugby. And she was like, that's it's your decision. She spoke to me about it, but she didn't try and convince me either way. It was very much, what do you want to do? And then where do you want to go from here? So, again, did swimming growing up. She's a swimming teacher. All my siblings were up at that. And I was like, no, it's not for me. I was stuck to football at that time. And, again, that, she supported me through those decisions. So it wasn't her forcing me to do stuff. She was always there, encouraging me, but it was very much on me to pick and choose what I wanted to do. And again, you find something you enjoy that way. So very lucky with the influences I had around me.
Yeah, because I guess in some ways parental influence could be negative, you could be pushed into something you don't want to do, but hopefully that's not the story for most people.
I think as well, we often, and we've all spoken about our parents' role in getting us into sport. I think sometimes we forget to acknowledge, for me, my parents have probably played an even bigger role as I've gone through my career, and now when you're going in that latter stage of your career and transitions and stuff like that, and career advice, and it changes, because I think when you're young you don't really acknowledge that your parents actually know a thing or two or have experienced things themselves. I think when you mature a bit, then you can have, more conversations, and you understand that actually they've been to certain places, or like for me and Rido, because it is our job, conversations and support might look slightly different, but I think it's something that I've probably appreciated more so as I've grown up, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think you do appreciate it when you're a teenager and your mum's dragging you out of bed at 4 a.m. and stuff. So, so let's talk about the very exciting prospect of the 2025 World Cup in England. Tell me how huge this is for the sport.
I mean, it's pretty huge. Yeah. Pretty huge. It's huge. I think...
How huge?
How huge? Huge. On a scale of hugeness.
Astronomical.
I think it's going to set records that are going to stand for a really long time, and I think that's really exciting. And I think we're not doing this on our own, right? You actually go further back than 22 in the Euros. You go back to cricket, hockey, netball World Cups. I think was that 16, 17, 18 or something like that. That was the start point, and they were big at the time. Remember the cricket, selling out with Lords for that final, and then we saw the Euros, and we all know how amazing that was. Yeah. I think we've got a really big opportunity as rugby and women's rugby in particular. First of all, we've got 8 locations around the country. So that accessibility, and obviously having one of those locations here is going to be amazing. Yeah. But also as a sport, we play in bigger stadia. So the footprint that we can leave is going to be absolutely massive. So just thinking about some of those ticket sales, and as I kind of mentioned a bit earlier, where this is going to leave us in the next 10 to 15 years' time is really exciting to think about, isn't it?
I mean, if you go back 10 to 15 years and women's rugby was hardly ever talked about, was it? It was not in the news. It wasn't on Sky Sports or, the other kind of broadcasters, like TNT and things like that. So, it's come on in leaps and bounds, hasn't it?
I think the other really exciting thing, listening to Amber talking earlier about 2010 and that being her first experience of really, seeing women's rugby, and it leading you to kind of being sat here doing what you're doing now. How we've already got amazing athletes. How brilliant are they going to be in the future? We're just going to reach so many more women and girls to inspire them to, be sat in these positions and your position as well in the future.
Because RFU have got quite an ambitious target, haven't they? Of this World Cup should inspire and get more women playing. Yeah. And I think it's something like an extra 100,000 women and girls to come and try out rugby. Yeah,
so we've got 2 North Stars, and they're called North Stars because they're hard to achieve, right? So one is to fill Allianz Stadium, which we're on track to do. That would be amazing for the final. And the other one is to get to 100,000 players. We've mapped that out across the country. It's super important that rugby union for women and girls is seen for them across the whole country. We've got some geographic hotspots that we're looking at. Obviously, Bristol is very important within that, but we also really want to overdrive rugby in the north. It's not necessarily a sport that's got the same density of numbers, although I do know it has delivered some great players.
I do. I might be biased, but the northern players are the best. So I think for me that's huge about the World Cup, that it is all over the country. And I think it's not just going to do so much for the sport and for getting people involved, but it's going to do so much for the cities. I remember being at the Men's World Cup and up in Newcastle when the men played at St James's Park, and the buzz around the community was huge. And it just created an excitement. To have that in Sunderland, York and Brighton, here in Bristol is going to be phenomenal. And I think, the rugby and the performances that will take place on the pitch will, on their own inspire. But I think the whole event, the whole tournament will do a lot to inspire and engage the community.
Yeah.
But it's also the match day experience inspires the players as well. It's like when we played France at Twickenham, my favourite bit of that day was getting off the bus, seeing people walk towards the stadium, and then literally going down the steps to a sea of people, which hadn't really experienced before. So it's great for the city, amazing for the fan experience to enjoy the game that's going to be put out on the pitch, but for the players as well, that gives them back something that's pretty special, and then they take that onto the pitch with them as well.
So the walkout must have been immense, was it?
Oh yeah, incredible. The noise, the anthems. It's hard to put into words sometimes, but
I had a very different experience on that day because I was pregnant at the time, so I was there as full fan mode. And I remember driving from Bristol to Twickenham, stopping at Reading services, and there was so many people in England shirts, And I was thinking, is there a men's game on as well today? Like, what is going on? Like, busloads of people. And it was, for me, that turning point. I was like, this is for the women. I've never seen this before, never experienced anything like it. Couldn't find parking. It was a nightmare. But I was up there with the crowd looking down on the players. So Rito talks about, you know, walking through the gates and, you know, all the fans being there. I was one of those fans looking, thinking, this is unbelievable. They're the halftime show, like Sophie Ellis-Bextor, my new friend, watching that, being like, this is amazing. This is the stage that the women deserve. And I also think it's probably important to acknowledge that me and Rito have been on that transitional journey from very much amateur rugby when we started, and we've seen it go into professionalism, and we've been lucky to be those players that picked up those first contracts and go through that system and keep trying to raise the game. But for me, and I'm sure for Rito, it just keeps going up and up and up astronomically, and I'm so excited for the future as well. And what I'll probably miss out on a lot of experiences, but you know, my nieces are mad into rugby. They'd love to be professional players, and you can be now. For us, it wasn't a career, it wasn't a job, it wasn't even, you know, in your wildest dreams, whereas it is now. And just thinking about the engagement that they're going to get, the platform that they're going to get, the support and the accessibility and the opportunities is huge. And I think the World Cup has got a massive part to play in that.
One of the things that I'm really looking forward to, because I think we've kind of gone through the last 10, 15 years of women's rugby evolving, and we've now got this World Cup. And I think seeing those moments like the France match we've been talking about, and just we've all got how we felt on that day. It's actually really interesting listening to everyone's version of that day. I'm really looking forward to World Cup. We'll get through the World Cup, and then I want to see what that first weekend in Premiership Women's Rugby clubs looks like. I want to see what it's like here. I want to see what that first match is going to be for, you know, each of those teams, because for me that's going to be the real measure of success. Have we been able to collectively do enough to mean that those moments that we're all really fond of and passionate about actually, very sadly, aren't those moments anymore, because they just become really fun but a bit more normal. And so being able to kind of kick out of the World Cup and into the league, and we saw what that happened with the WSL with the Lionesses. I hope that we get that moment, and something we're working towards.
And Bristol Bears recently have had kind of like a bit of an effect with the Ilona Mayer effect. Obviously ticket sales went through the roof.
It's crazy, isn't it? The effect that one player can have, not just on a team, but on a league, on you know, on attendance, on visibility. I'm all for it. I think it's unbelievable. It's amazing. And I think, you know, earlier we were talking about barriers, or not even barriers, like opportunities in sport. And for me, it is creating stars and showing individuals. I think sport's gone from a place, and I think team sport's gone from a place where a team was just a team, like a logo, everyone was the same, everyone's identity was that team. I think now we've realised actually it's about the individuals in that team, and creating people that young boys and girls can resonate with, women can resonate with, people can say, oh yeah, you know what, I dress like that, or I'm into that music and they're into that, and I see them playing and I see their style of playing, I want to play like that. And actually, oh no, I did a tackle like that on the weekend, and look, they're doing that against France at Twickenham. And I think the sport is benefiting hugely from opening itself up and, you know, giving you that window into the individuals. And I think Ilona's a huge example of that. So let's create more Ilonas.
Yeah, definitely. How did you feel like when you first saw someone wearing a shirt with your name on? That must be like a crazy moment.
I think I'm still waiting. It's my own, actually.
In the mirror.
It's in the mirror. I think going back to that point, one of our players, Lucy Burgess, the first time it got recorded as well, which is like pretty cool. But one of the first games that we had our names on the back of our shirts for Bristol, one of the girls in the crowd had Burgess on the back, and she turned around and Lucy just burst into tears. So she was there like signing some things, and it just took her by complete surprise, and she just started crying. And like now that's like more and more. So yeah, still waiting for mine. But it's exciting that the role models can then be seen, and it's like for them
Yeah.
to then have their name on the back of their shirt kind of like snowballs that effect as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I still find it quite hard to comprehend at times that when we're on a pitch playing, that all the people around the pitch have come to watch you. I'm like, they've come to watch us playing rugby. I find it baffling.
Yeah.
Particularly when we play overseas and fans that travel. But even the local fans, I think there was probably a time where maybe I came across a bit rude because I'd walk past people thinking, they don't want my signature. No way do they want that. But they did. But just because I was like, we're so not used to it. And to me and my friends, they keep me very grounded. They're like, oh, you rubbish, whatever. But I think it's really important that we kind of understand the influence that we can and we do have. And I think we've got a huge role in playing that part and inspiring those around us and inspiring the community. Like, that is Bristol sports #1 kind of aim, and I think we're doing that, and you can see that, and you can see it when we're playing at Shaftesbury Park, playing at Ashton Gate. So yeah,
It's also a responsibility, isn't it, to be a role model?
Yeah, definitely.
I think we've seen that with Alona coming in as well. She handles it like so well in and around the club. She just grafts.
Yeah.
Like, she's in the gym, like so strong, does that, and then she's got this online persona as well. And like the last couple of games I haven't played, but been doing the signing sessions, and people have flown from New York just to come to that game to fly back or come over from Spain. So just hearing those stories, you can see like the responsibility that us as players also have to grow the game as well.
And she takes that responsibility well, doesn't she? Because I went to see the Gloucester game, Gloucester Hartbury game, and I think she spent about half an hour to 3/4 of an hour signing, taking photos with people after the match. I mean, that just shows the effect that she has, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think like as players, we understand that you talk about investment into teams and rugby. It's not just the commercial partners and the brands, which I think you talk about a lot. It's the fans. They invest in us. They support us. They invest their time, their money, their energy. Like, it makes such a huge difference when you can hear them on the sideline shouting Bristol, shouting whatever it is, you know, at the Red Roses games. It's huge, and I think, you know, just thank you for doing that. Everyone that's turned up, everyone that's watched, everyone that's listened, clicked on something, liked, been there in person, cheering. Like, it's really important. It means a huge lot, and I think it's important that as players we kind of acknowledge that.
It's one of the things actually that when you think about things that you're slightly worried about in the future, I think we've been able to grow this sport to a really great point, and I think all of the players are so generous with their time as well afterwards, you know, whether it's international matches or club matches, you've got to get in, you've got to kind of refuel, and you stay out for a really long time, and we've got to work out how to not lose that as the sport grows and the crowds get bigger and they get a bit more intense. And so I think for us collectively trying to put our heads together on how do we not lose that special kind of set of values that rugby and other women's team sport can offer, and we keep that connection with the fans as that hopefully the game gets even bigger.
I think I can definitely remember that. I remember as a kid growing up, and I had this signed picture of Johnny Wilkinson in Falcon shirt, because Falcons on my team obviously been in and on. And how special was that for me on my wall for so many years. And I remember, you know, going to my dad taking me to Man United to watch Beckham. Obviously, Man United, my team. Shout out Man United. But like, that is so special. I remember that as a fan, and you know, you want to pay it back. You want to pay back those experiences.
And back then there was no women inspiration, so you were looking up to the men in those sports, weren't you? Because, like you said, they weren't visible.
Yeah, and what's great is that it's not just about women inspiring girls and men inspiring boys. There's plenty of boys at our games as well, also asking for photos and autographs, and that's awesome to see.
And how are you finding it? You obviously balancing the, you know, rugby playing and the kind of being the star of it, I guess. Is it difficult?
In my head, I don't see myself as a star, so it's not so difficult. I just kind of go about my business.
I think it's probably a reflection of where we've come from with the game.
Yeah.
My first cap away in Swansea, I reckon, can you remember that game? We lost to Wales. Were you playing that?
I was in the stand.
Right. Rito was in the stand. It's probably one of 30 people.
I was cheering you on.
Yeah. Honestly, there was about 30 people watching.
Oh God.
So I think it's almost a reflection of we can't believe where it's got to, from where it's come from. And again, from club rugby, I was playing up at DMP, and you were having to pay to play.
Yeah.
And no one was on the side unless they were your parents or your siblings or your friends. Whereas it's got to now, we had, was it over 10,000 the other week for that Gloucester game. And I think it's more like, how has that happened?
Yeah.
And there's loads of reasons why it's happened, but it's unbelievable, I think. So I think that's why sometimes we find it hard to acknowledge, because sometimes it also seems like it's just happened overnight.
Do you guys ever think about, so I know some of the former Red Roses over the years have come back into camp and talked to you, and I know you've been in programme for a little while now, but do you think about what it will be like when you're doing that for the next group and what you want to tell them? Or, you know, you almost think about the Jill Burns, I didn't have any boots type stories, that we had to go and find our own kit. And you've had that in your journeys, but probably a bit earlier. What does it look like for the next generation of players from your point of view?
I think we open up these like conversations at clubs sometimes when like the newer generation of players come in and they like, oh, we haven't got this or we haven't got that, and you're like, whoa, hang on a minute. You're getting free kit, and we had to pay for ours, and we had to pay for membership to play, and we had to drive to go and play DMP, pray that the driver didn't get injured after playing 80 minutes, and then drive home and like carpool that stuff. And we complain if like the Bears bus doesn't show up, but we've still got a really nice coach and we're not paying for travel. So it's like just ticking along and just being like appreciating like the things that you've got, like wanting to keep drive the game forward, but it's like never take anything for granted. I think it's probably like the biggest message that I'd give. Like yes, you're in a position where you've earned the stuff that you get, and you want to keep driving that forward for the next generation, but don't take what you've got for granted.
I think it's exactly that. I think Rito's hit the nail on the head. It's that appreciation and I think perspective at times. I think sport is so intense, and especially when you're in big games and tournaments and everything ends up under a microscope and you're in a bubble and everything, like I said, it is incredibly intense. And I think sometimes you forget to take a step back and look at what's happening, look at what you're involved in and how special it is. And I think particularly because it's, can be so outcome based on results, a lot of the time that can drive your feelings of being involved in games and matches and teams. I think at times I've had to say to the girls, because we've been complaining about we didn't enjoy lunch, which is a ridiculous thing.
You used to have to pay for your jacket potato, didn't you?
Exactly, £1.50 after a game for a jacket potato, which is an absolute bargain. But still, it's funny because you'll find people complain about certain things, which is natural. We all complain, don't we? We all love to complain. We're British. But
I think it's very important as well. I think like, what am I having for lunch today?
At times, I think it is important to have that perspective, to step back and be like, how lucky are we that we get to do this day in, day out as our jobs, running around with our mates after a ball like glorified Labradors. It's incredible. We get to travel the world, experience the experiences that we do, to have so much investment, to represent our country or our city. That's phenomenal. So I think for us it'll be, and from time to time it is about just making sure people stay grounded and
And obviously one of your North Stars of the RFU is to try and, inspire more girls and women into the sport. But that can only happen if the grassroots, clubs are there.
Yep.
So how do we use that inspiration to kind of, get more and more people involved?
You kind of think we spent like 20-25 minutes chatting and probably not touched on this yet. And why does any governing body exist or any sport exist? It's so that somebody can pick up a ball or whatever their sport is for the first time. It's about making sure that at a community level that sport is as healthy as it absolutely can be. And so community rugby clubs are why the RFU exists. We're a member organisation, and that's what we're here for. We are really fortunate that we've got really amazing role models to be able to help us to promote the game, so we can make sure those community rugby clubs stay as healthy as they can do in those areas. I think just in terms of some of those targets, I think we have to have targets because we have to justify investment, but it's also really unhelpful talking about them.
Yeah.
Because I think you can talk about those mass numbers, but for me, every single story, like just hearing your story about how you got into rugby and your pathway in and how proud you were of, you know, that county cap, that for me is just so valuable. And so I think it is as much, yes, there's a breadth we need to achieve, but I think it's really about the storytelling that sits behind every single person's experiences and what community sport, you know, can do for people.
That brings me nicely onto you, Bryher, because obviously you know what the landscape's like here in Bristol.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that like being in a in a senior team like Dings is huge. That we go training on Tuesday and we have to walk past all the little boys and girls, and you just think, oh, that's the next generation. It's like beautiful to watch. I think that they're all playing around, and you never know what they're going to be. I think in the future, and to have like the World Cup on their doorstep, I just hope they're just going to fill the stadium. Absolutely.
And like you're right in saying, what are they going to be? They're not necessarily going to be rugby players, but that grounding of rugby might inspire them to other things.
Yeah,
so.
definitely. I mean, it's such a rounding sport. I think there's so much in it you can take out of it, like the resilience, determination, that it just builds you as a whole person. That you don't have to take rugby as that opportunity, but it does open so many doors for you. It's great to watch.
And with your job with Wesport, have you noticed more clubs like having more female teams? And
I think it sort of like depends. Like little pockets, for sure. But it's getting them to come together and not to silo yourself just into a club. That I think from kind of personal experience, not just through work, but we've been trying to get clubs to like play together and to make it more of a community thing. Because you have to play against each other, but even if you're not in the same league, you need to try and build the profile of rugby together. And work your community, whether you.
And obviously being part of a team, the whole point is that you want to play other teams, isn't it? So, and I think what you were saying was back when you were playing rugby, was you had to travel quite a way. So
a long way. And I think we've spoken a lot about the elite side of rugby, but I do think the biggest impact that the World Cup will have will be in the grassroots, and that's where we need it to be, because it's from those grassroots players, clubs, that you find your international stars. That's where they come from. That's where we all picked up the love of the game. That's where we all had our first taste of rugby. And for me, I'm also looking forward to in the future when, you know, maybe I stop playing internationally and at a Premiership level to go back to my grassroots club, because that's where, you know, you can enjoy a pint or a pasty after a game with your neighbour.
You don't get to do that now.
But that's what it's about, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's that sense of community. So hopefully, I mean, what do you guys think will happen after the World Cup? Do you think hopefully like more members sign up, or?
Yeah, hopefully. I think we're all thinking that. I mean, it's when we sort of found out we were on the venues, it just erupted. We were like so excited for it. Like, oh, new people are going to join us. We're really excited. I think I even saw that like back at home, like when we have more events on our doorstep, more people want to join because they've seen it and it's on their phones, it's on Instagram, they're seeing it more and more, and the profile just gets raised and raised and raised. And whether they just turn up just once or they keep playing, that's what we want. We want the people in the door.
I think it's also not just the amount of players increasing at clubs, it's the demographic of clubs is changing, of the community game is changing. There's more and more women and girls playing, and I think that's creating some really special environments in grassroots.
So I think schools have a big part to play in this, as in, you know, my daughter played tag rugby at primary school, but she doesn't seem to have the opportunity in her senior school. Do you think they have a big part to play in this?
Yeah, I was actually just going to jump in on schools there. I think we think back to the 2015 Rugby World Cup that was hosted in England from a men's point of view. There was a programme called All Schools, and that recruited 750 state schools that had not previously played rugby to put rugby into their kind of programmes, and that was boys and girls. And we're seeing some of the benefit of that still. So we're 10 years on, and it's actually really great to be hosting these two World Cups, men's and women's, a decade apart, because you can really see the impact. There were 80,000 girls that went through the first few years of that programme. They're now kind of into their like teenage and early 20s, and so there's a big impact there, and we've got that really strong number in the pipeline. The local organising committee for Rugby World Cup 2025 is headed up by a lady called Sarah Massey, who's actually from the southwest, and she and her team have been doing a huge amount with schools, particularly in the cities, but across the whole country. And there's a lot that will be landing over the next kind of few weeks and months, toolkits and those types of things. I think if we just think back to kind of 2012, 2013, before the World Cup in France, there were only about 12,000 women and girls that played rugby in this country. And what came with that is actually then not a lot of PE teachers that necessarily played rugby. So we go back to that point of influence. And I think so making sure that we've got the right people in the right environment, such as teachers that know how to facilitate rugby, even at the most basic level, before hopefully children can go on to rugby clubs and, you know, they can get that slightly more specialist experience. But yeah, schools have just got such a huge part to play.
And then obviously we're talking about the youth and people coming through, but, you know, hopefully the World Cup will inspire women of all ages to take part and give it a go.
The impact programme that we have, so we're really fortunate that when we bid to host the World Cup, we asked for government funding for a legacy programme, which the government supported us with £14.5 million additional pounds to put into community rugby. And the theme of that is a multi-generational legacy. We feel that there was potentially a missed generation of women in rugby that didn't necessarily have the opportunity to not even just play, but just to go to a rugby club. If they weren't serving the teas, bluntly, then they probably never been. Yeah. So we have some really good partnerships in place, and there's some in this area as well. One of which is with the WI, which is turning out to be a really, really interesting kind of partnership, looking at how we can utilise clubhouses, but also how you can get some of those women just thinking about whether it's not necessarily playing, but it's supporting rugby in different ways. Our Parks is another partner. We actually have really good success at recruiting adult women into rugby. And so we need to make sure that we kind of keep focusing on that area as well. I think once you've picked up a ball once, you're kind of hooked no matter how old you are.
I think what I found as well is my sister-in-law has actually started playing rugby at the, you know, I won't say exactly how much, but I think...
she wouldn't thank you for it, would she?
Maybe plus 40, but she started because her daughter started playing rugby and she was supporting them, and she wanted to be able to support them more by knowing more about the game. And from that, so she went and started training, played a bit, and then got into coaching. And talking to people, I've heard a lot more of that, because there's so many girls now getting into rugby, their mums are like, well, I want to help grow the club, I want to be able to do the coaching or the first aid or whatever it is, be part of it. That roles that I think usually you would see dads doing with their sons, now mums are doing. And I think, you know, that's great to see.
We've spoken a lot about the legacy from the playing side and growing the numbers of the community game, but you just touched on, like, there's so many other roles within the game. Like, we need referees. Like, there's you got your Sarah Cox, your Holly Davisons, Amy Baratheon. They're growing the game from a referee perspective, but what legacy can we leave with them? The World Cup gives them a stage to be able to perform, and it might be like rugby isn't for them from a playing perspective, but can we get more referees into the game? Can we get more team managers into the game? Physios, S&Cs, like there's so many other roles within rugby that like having a bigger platform and growing it, so not just from a player's perspective, but can we shed the light on what the physios do at the PWR clubs? Can we get more female physios into those roles? Female S&Cs, again, it's a male-dominated environment, but there are some great female S&Cs coming through the pathway. Like, how can we grow the game, like, holistically and not just from that pitch perspective?
I think it's definitely helped seeing kind of women referees in the game, in the men's game, isn't it? And I think that really then normalises it. So it's not like, well, if you're going to be a female referee, you have to stick to the women's game. I think having those influences in the men's game as well is always going to just kind of normalise women being in those roles. Is there any female coaches at Bristol Bears?
Not at the moment.
No?
Hopefully in the future.
Yeah, I think we're about to see the next influx of, I think, of professional female coaches. And I think that'll come from the professional players. Because I think prior to that, because rugby wasn't professional, once you'd finished playing, people already had careers which they were doing alongside, that was their career. Whereas now you're seeing a group of players who have been professional, that have a really high knowledge, understanding, technical awareness, that are then going to go into coaching. And Rido's is a great example, who is at coach. Well, she'll be able to tell you herself at the university. But I think I'm excited because I think the next generation of coaches that come through. That yes, it will always have your strong contingent of men, but I think there's going to be a very strong contingent of women.
And I think also it's a vocation, it's a career.
Yeah.
It's not something you're trying to then do on the side of having, you know, another job or a day job in inverted commas. And I feel like the generation of women that probably, you know, graduated out of international programs globally in rugby over the last 20 years have had to go and find a job that wasn't this. It wasn't full time, whether that was as a player or as a coach. We've obviously got some brilliant people. We think about Sarah Hunter, who's in with the Red Roses, actually on maternity leave at the moment with her first baby. We've got Lou Meadows in there as well. But throughout PWR, there are great female coaches and directors of rugby. We've just got to make sure that we keep those environments set up in the right way, that we can encourage, you know, the right pathways through, which then leads to match officials, physio, all of the other roles that we would want women to take up as a profession.
And that brings me nicely on to yourself talking about Sarah with her maternity leave. I think you were the first player to ever have a maternity leave in your contract, and hopefully that just inspires more players to... Myself and Vicky Cornborough both, having that maternity leave, and I think we've said plenty, we're so lucky that we had that maternity. Well, it's 2025 now, so I'm not sure, like... It's great that it's finally here, and it's here to be really suitable and to serve a purpose. It's not just on paper, and I think previously there might have been something on paper, but it's tailored to someone that works a 9 to 5 in an office. It's not tailored to a rugby player, because those needs are very, very different. So to have that in place at both England and Bristol and to benefit from that was great. And for me, it's about showing that, you know, you can be a mum and a rugby player, and you can continue to be so. I think previously players had to retire or end their careers early or wait to start a family till later than they would have liked to have chosen. Whereas now it's about changing that narrative to show that you can do both. I think the next stage for us is the maternity was fantastic, but it's now about creating that parent policy, because I thought the hard bit would be returning naively, obviously, in the, you know, after having Hallie in those first few months, whereas, toddler life is a whole new ball game, which is both magical and wonderful and energy depleting at the same time. It's about, I very much said, like, and the RFU in Bristol said it's going to have to be a work in progress in how we go through it, because we hadn't done it before. Now, just to clarify, people had kids and played before, because obviously grassroots or previously in England, it had happened, but the professional era is different. The needs from the players is very different. So we've kind of navigated that route together. But yeah, for me, it's been about putting a spotlight on it and opening up the conversation, and not just opening up the conversation at Bristol and England, but also opening up the conversation at other nations, because it shouldn't be that only Red Roses and Black Ferns can have children whilst playing. It should be that the Irish players can, the Welsh players can, the French players can. So hopefully it's created some conversation. It started off a movement, which we'll see more and more players as we head into the future, being both mothers and it
kids.
should hopefully open up the conversation about, kind of, as we all know, the barrier some women getting involved in sport is having children. So hopefully this is great. I mean, you're like a role model in the sense that you're doing it all, you're juggling your child, and hopefully this is inspiring women that have gone, well, I've had a baby.
Yeah.
Because it is a big barrier, isn't it? Like finding the time after juggling children, and as
huge.
you're knowing with the toddler running around.
It's not just the physical barriers, it's the mental barriers. You go through so many changes when you have a child. I saw something the other day that said, you don't start to feel like you again until 2 years after. And I'm like, yeah, I can totally believe that. There's routine changes, there's all sorts, but what's great is I've seen so many women who have reached out to me that have said, seeing you do that has given me the confidence, or it's made me think differently, that I can train whilst pregnant. And I think previously there'd been a lot of guidance out there which is dated. Like, we know more now. We know that it's much more about doing your normal, like, it's individual plan. So I was able to train because I'd always trained. It was no different for me. So if it's something that you've already done, or if you've spoken to your doctor and you have that guidance, then why not? And I think previously people were very much scared, or they were like, these are the hard and fast rules. When I was sat with HR and we were going through what do you call it? Things that you can and can't do. Risk assessment. That's it. I sat with HR going through a risk assessment, and they were saying, do you lift heavy objects? Do you work in a cold environment? I'm thinking, yes, we train at night in the winter and I'm lifting weights in the day. Yeah. They were like, can we not do those? And I'm, no, that's part of my day-to-day. And it was quite funny because they'd never filled out a risk assessment for a rugby player.
No,
they'd always done it.
Yeah, and probably quite dated, as you said. That's probably the rules from
very
long time
whereas
ago.
We know so much more now. So yeah, the amount of women that have reached out and said, you've given me the confidence, you've maybe shut down some of the taboo topics, whether it's breastfeeding or whatever it is. So I think, like I said, it's opening that conversation, because women can do a lot more than I think they believe at times.
Yeah, and like I said, that's obviously opened up those conversations, which is great, but there's so many other barriers, aren't there, to women kind of taking part in sports or getting involved and getting active?
There are. Just to touch back on Abbie and well, not just Abbie, and all of the women that want to have children and compete in sport. I just think as well, though, I think there's some stuff that we collectively have got fundamentally wrong here. So the fact that Abbie is facing a World Cup in not very many days, 200 and something days, whilst having to think about how she's going to manage her childcare over the next few months in a really, like, that's not ideal. We want her to be focused on playing in that World Cup. But I think this is where this isn't an issue for rugby or for the RFU or for Bristol Bears. It's a societal issue again. And I think we're really fortunate that we contract the players centrally, so that it means that, you know, in the same way I'm an employee of the RFU, Abbie's an employee. So we do get to have those conversations. But being able to work with people like Abbie to speak to the government bluntly, to be able to say, we all need some help, we've got this wrong collectively, but we can't solve it on our own. We need all of, you know, women's sport, and I'm sure there'll be other industries as well that need to come together that have the same challenges or different challenges, but in the same way. And so I think I do appreciate that, you know, we will hold up our maternity policy, and in some ways it's world leading, and that's brilliant. But I also think it's really disappointing that that's the world leading that we have. But as a union or as one organisation, we can only do so much on our own, and we need to be able to use the experiences that athletes have to be able to demonstrate more broadly that we need more support in these areas.
And it does kind of then filter down then to like say grassroots, doesn't it?
Exactly.
And although, like you said, it's not maternity leave, it's about those women kind of going, right, okay, we can go back to this. It's not just, you know, it's not the end of me playing rugby.
And some of those grassroots clubs are leading lights. I've been, you know, tagged in posts, and there was one club that said what they've put in place for players that are pregnant, stuff like pausing their membership. So, because obviously they pay for their membership, so it's paused, so when they get back to playing, then they can pick it up. So they're not, you know, losing out on money. Providing an S&C that can work with them to tailor a plan whilst they're pregnant and on their return, to provide them with maybe like online classes about hypnobirthing, like stuff like that, rooms for breastfeeding. These are grassroots clubs. So as much as, you know, we're saying that we've gone and spoken to like world leading experts on what we can provide, I think it's unbelievable that clubs are getting off their own back and saying, right, well, we want to be the best as well. Yeah. And I'm sure there's plenty of lessons that we could learn from talking to them, because they're the areas, they're the environments where it's happening all the time. It's not been happening in the professional environment. So maybe that's where we can information share and actually pick up a thing or two from there.
I got a great email the other day, it was earlier this week actually, from a lady in Oxfordshire who had her own experience of returning to play in a local rugby club, and she'd ended up just she paid herself for just a handful of physio sessions to just help her have a bit of confidence. Cost £100, and she was like, what if we could work out at local level how to find that £100 for you know, the women that are going to do this, and we could, you know, work to create a bit of a programme so that they can just have what really feels like the minimum. But for them, it felt like something that was, you know, being gifted. I thought it was such a good idea. Yeah. So I think, you know, as Abbie said, seeing those types of ideas that are coming through, there's a lot more that we can do in this space collectively.
And other barriers are kind of mental health, isn't it? And women's perception of what they can and can't do. And I know that you are an advocate. You obviously work with charities at Loose Heads.
Yeah, so I'm a Loose Heads ambassador.
Yeah.
I've been on board with them for a fair few years now. And yeah, I just think it's really important, like what the guys are doing. They're trying to get a mental health lead in every club across the UK. And like that's their mission statement. And that's just recognising that we've spoken a lot about the community, what rugby can provide. And ultimately, like we've spoken about being professional and having that career path as a job. But for the majority of players, it's a hobby that they do on the side. And rugby gives so much to those people. It's a community of friends, a support network that they can go and talk to about anything, or if they're having a tough week with family life or work life, they turn up to rugby training and they can forget everything else, leave it on the white line, cross onto the pitch and just have fun. And it might be an hour, 2 hours a week where they can forget everything else that's going on. So Loose Heads are trying to like promote that message and create that environment in the clubhouse where it's a safe space. Like if you do want to go and have a pint, have your pasty after the game and go and talk to someone and share those experiences, like people are there for you to talk to and to share that with. And like rugby's perfectly set up for that to happen, because of how good the community level is. So it's how can Loose Heads drive that message and to not just turn up, actually how can we spot people that are struggling, how can we reach out to them, how can we help, but it's how can we reach that individual, because again we've spoken about everyone being different, so how can we support each player in our club throughout that process.
And is there an answer, or is it still something we're figuring out?
Definitely still something we're figuring out, but the easiest way is go and ask someone if they're okay, and ask it 3 times. It's quite hard to brush someone off for three.
Yeah.
So, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. It's like we do it all the time. If you're struggling a bit, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Stock standard answer, brush past. But if you really think that someone's struggling, ask a couple more times in the right way, the right time, the right place. But you'll generally get a pretty good answer after that.
Yeah.
And it'll help them open up and you can then come up with a solution together.
Bryher, what are you finding the barriers to women getting involved in the game?
I think if you're on your own, that's a huge thing. So like if you're turning up to a new club the first time, that's a huge barrier on its own. I think having someone like in the club is kind of like that sort of in between the like liaison, as it were, really helps to be like, come and find me, like we'll talk on our own, then I'll introduce you to the team is great. And that's just like personal experience, I think, coming from back home, coming up to here, and then this is now my new home, that to find a new team was like, oh no, I'm not sure. But actually, I knew I was safe with rugby. And I think that's what's comforting about it. I think people need to hopefully take from that it's not a huge scary barrier. Like as soon as you step into the clubhouse where it is, you should hopefully feel at home, that people are quite warming, that you should be scooped up with welcome arms. I think as well potentially is like the kit aspect is a bit of a barrier. If you're brand new to rugby and you're like, oh, I haven't got any boots, what do I do? We've taken that on board in various teams, that we've all got a spare kit, so we have spare boots in our car or in the clubhouse, and we'll go, okay, who needs boots? Yeah. So we've got kit. That shouldn't be a barrier for someone new turning up. Yeah. The way to go.
Well, it's also the expense, isn't it? Like you're saying, you've got to pay club membership, then you've got to buy yourself a pair of boots, you've got to buy the kit, etc. That can be a bit of a barrier, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think working together, we've all realised that, and we've spoken openly about our experiences of like what was putting you off rugby for so long. And it might have been, it's the misconception of, oh, I don't know if I fit the frame to rugby, of where am I going to fit? I've watched it on the TV, where am I going to fit? But again, you're looking at professionals that are training day in, day out, that as grassroots, we don't look like them.
No.
Not necessarily, but if we do, fantastic. That's what it is, that there is a place for everyone in rugby as well, that whether it is on the pitch, is it the coach, is it a physio, what is it going to be? You find something in that, I think.
And how do you think we're going to get those women to come into and fill those roles? Because like you said, it might not just be the playing, it could be the sidelines, but doing different roles. Yeah,
I think I see this as well from like, so I was a secondary school teacher as well, so secondary school PE, that I was feeling that advocacy role of, you can be anything in this remit, that we had boys that wanted to be professionals. It was like, cool, what would you like to do? So they just say professionals, and you go, well, there's loads of jobs. What do you want to do? Do you want to be a referee? Do you want to be a coach? What would you like to be? And then they see the women's side as well, and they go, oh, that's something else to think about. They don't just think now one side, and it's the same with the girls and the women. I think that they've now got that platform of going, I can be professional. It was so amazing to hear these conversations of, I want to be a professional rugby player.
Yeah.
And I never had that when I was younger. But for them to have that is just amazing, and you can actually guide them now to what can they do, how can you get to there, what do you need to do, how do you train. And I think I get like giving them those like opportunities, so having those rugby clubs.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a rugby club, I put it on, and then to give those experiences as well, so go and talk in like assemblies, bringing people in, just openly talking about experiences as well, and seeing the people's faces, it's just changing, I think.
I mean, it is crazy, isn't it, to think now that girls can say that's what they want to do as a career, which is, we've come on leaps and bounds with that, haven't we? So, and I'm sure if you said that when you were at school, they'd have probably laughed at you.
Yeah, well, they wouldn't dare, but no, and you know, like I referenced earlier, my nieces are both really crazy into rugby, and they would say, you know, they'd want to be professional players. And when they said that to me a few years ago, it was almost a pinch myself moment, because that's something I really struggled with. The plan was never to play rugby. I went to university, studied history and politics, and the plan was to do a law conversion course and go into law. And it was quite a difficult conversation I had to have with my parents when I said, I think I'm gonna, you know, go after rugby, although it's actually not a career yet, but I think it will be in a couple of years. So once I finish my degree, I'm just gonna be unemployed and just train full time. That's quite a hard conversation to have with your parents. So I'm going to pursue a career that isn't actually a career. Especially, you know, when they've invested so much into helping you get to where you are at university. And I found it really tough from a values point of view, in that for me, the conversation I had with my dad was, if I was a boy, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Because if I was playing the same level as your son, you would be like, this is amazing. I've got nothing to worry about. I'm going to go straight into, you know, if I was playing for England, I would have a club look after me. I'd have a solid income. I'd be paid a lot, you know. But because I was a girl, there was a stark contrast in reality, and the reality that there were no contracts, there was no money. But we saw the change in momentum. I saw that. I was on that tide that went through the 2017 World Cup, where contracts came in, but then they went away again, and then they came back in for kind of the long run. So it was a big gamble. I like to call that year when I moved down to Harlequins. So I moved from Newcastle to Harlequins. There was no contract. I just said, I'm going to be what I called fun employed, where I was unemployed, but it was hella fun, just playing rugby, pursuing that dream, because in my head I was like, they're going to come in and I want to give myself the best shot. And, you know, thankfully my parents supported my wild ambitions in that. But to see now there is that security, and, you know, me and the team, we've also worked very hard to kind of increase the security around the contracts and everything at England. So yeah, to hear my nieces say that, for it to be, you know, a genuine career path, like I said, was a bit of a pinch me moment because of where we'd come from to where we are now.
It's quite interesting to hear you say about the fact that, you know, if it was a boy, it'd have been a different conversation. And like going to the grassroots level, do we sometimes, like, for women, do they go, well, I can't carry on like this because I've got to get a career, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And do you think sometimes, whereas a man would just carry on playing, do you think there is that kind of difference? Do you think that there's, you know, and now we're kind of coming around and we're changing that narrative?
For me, the starkest bit, and, you know, I think it's really brilliant to be able to talk about all the great things that we're doing and the progress, but I still think there's hard areas. So possibly think of some of your teammates that have other jobs, so they're not able to be fully professional because they're studying, or they have to have jobs in other ways, and I still think that is quite vastly different between the men's and the women's game. You know, as you go through that pathway and you break into that club that club structure, I think that, it shouldn't be a huge aspiration, but it still is at the moment for rugby players at the top end of the domestic game, I think, to have a more equal experience to the men. I think the pathways are starting to even out in terms of the experience that boys and girls get. There's still more work to do there. And I think at the community level, that, again, there will be differences. But I read something actually yesterday that said that this generation of fathers are spending 3 times more time with their children than the previous generation of fathers. And we've talked a lot about women today, but I think we also have to recognise that things are changing for men too, and making sure that, we've created enough time and space for everybody to be able to do what they want to do, with their families, and how rugby enhances that as opposed to being a problem within it.
I think it's creating that level playing field, isn't it? It's not about the man going, oh, I'll let you go and do your sport, whatever. It should be that, you all equally have time to do what you need to do.
Yeah.
That's definitely what I've seen at my local grassroots club up in where I'm from, in Keswick. And that is that like I was talking about, the demographic of the club has completely changed. It used to just be the men and the boys. Now they have a thriving women's section and girls section and mixed section. And so now it's a whole family environment. So talking about, father spending more time with their kids, like, it's not just somewhere where men go to escape, have a few beers with the lads, and whilst their wives or partners are at home sorting out the rest of their lives, it's now like I said, it's a family environment where everybody is there, everybody is welcome, everybody is part of it. And actually I see sometimes, so I've been up and involved in a few coaching sessions with both the girls and the women, where I'll see the women be like, right, I'm off to training now. So it's the husbands that are like, yeah, I'm watching on the sideline with the kids. And yeah, it's just changing roles. And it's, I think it's changing roles and it's levelling them as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Just one last thing. If you could just inspire one person to get active, what would you tell them?
Take every opportunity and just go and enjoy it.
I think just get out once and you'll feel better. And we talk a lot about being happier and healthier, and physical activity. You can just deliver on that in bucket loads.
And we talked a lot about rugby. It doesn't have to necessarily be rugby, does it? So
eventually,
we will persuade you. How about you, Abbie?
I think just try it. Don't take yourself too seriously, because no one else there is. And yeah, everyone's in the same boat as you.
How about you?
I think try and find something that you're interested in, something that piques your interest. Give it a go. If you're not sure, if you don't like it, find something else.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and good luck with the World Cup, ladies.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
No worries.
Amazing, great stuff. I ticked everything off.
Oh, good.